cabinet met, and the Alberta cabinet has agreed to voluntarily take a 5% wage reduction as part of their commitment to exercising fiscal discipline.
What a hero. Or is Alberta's premier gearing up to call an election? Not like he'd need help winning with both the Liberals and the Wild Rose parties without leaders. National Post Calgary correspondent Jen Gerson joins me with more. Hey, Jen, welcome back to the show. A 5% cut is symbolic. They still remain the highest paid MLAs in the country by far. I want to ask you this. Is this a symbol of restraint, telegraphing to the public service we're going to make other cuts? Or is this... Go ahead.
Yeah, that's how I read it. I read this as a, I think I put it on Twitter, I think he's ceding the ground for public service rollbacks, which to be fair to him, are going to happen. There's no way around it. I mean, MLAs in Alberta aren't the only ones who are disproportionately highly paid. The public sector here is also highly paid at almost every level. Yeah. So, you know, I think that we are going to have to see some cuts and some rollbacks, and this was the only way that he could credibly make that claim. This was ceding the ground.
Now, I am terrified about the prospect of him raising taxes or bringing in new taxes, either bringing in a sales tax or, more likely, bringing in some sort of carbon tax, or, even more likely, changing Alberta's flat tax, which he particularly attacked on a radio show a couple weeks ago. So I'm worried that this isn't just about softening up people of, I took a cut, you can take a cut, that it's sort of saying, well, I am doing noble things, so you Albertans have to pay more. Am I being too paranoid? Because look, he got his Wild Rose critics out of the way. He didn't need the Wild Rose MLAs to get a super duper majority. He already had a majority. He needed to get them out of the way because they were the only thing standing between him and tax hikes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly correct. And Prentice has actually been trying to make the soft pitch for taxes for weeks now. He's doing almost daily appearances and media conferences explaining exactly what situation Alberta is in, and we're looking at an $8 billion hole and a $40 billion budget, 7 to 8. So I don't think there's any way around this. Cuts and tax increases are going to happen. I would be baffled if they weren't in the next budget. Yeah, I think that the flat tax is probably going to be the first on the list. We're going to probably go to some form of progressive taxation. I mean, if you have to raise taxes, people like Jack Mintz would tell you that a sales tax is probably the best way to go if you have to do it. But the truth is that I think he's probably going to anger everyone on the left and the right, because he's going to have to use every tool at his disposal to make the budget work.
Now, here's the thing. If I'm not mistaken, like the federal government, Alberta has a fixed election date. Am I correct in that, Jen? I don't want to proceed with my point, which is there is no reason to have a snap election. He has a majority government. He himself doesn't have a mandate because he just parachuted in as the premier. He has not been tested. But the most obvious political reason for him to break the fixed election date law and go early is to catch his two chief opposition parties, the Liberals and the Wild Rose, leaderless. I guess the NDP has a leader. But let me ask you this. We know that would be inappropriate to do, but politicians are not the most appropriate people. Would there be enough of a moral blowback to stop him from doing such an audacious anti-democratic move? Frankly, I don't think he cares, because if there's no place for people to register their outrage, if there's no party in which to vest their votes, they can be as outraged as they want. He already dissolved the other parties.
Pretty much. Yeah, sure, there will be tons of moral blowback. Who cares? Who else are you going to vote for? But I think there's actually another rationale for calling a snap election. One, yeah, of course, you know, you get the opposition while they're down. You go for the jugular while their feet are broken, right? So yeah, there's that. But I also think that one of the reasons why he might be interested in calling a snap election is because now his caucus is just too large, right? His caucus is what, like 74 out of 87, something ridiculous like that. But he's only got 20 cabinet seats. Well, how are you? And we've seen from both Stelmach and from Redford that when premiers go down in Alberta, they go down because the backbenches get unhappy, or because your bored, idle caucus with nothing to do decides to cause revolt, essentially. That's certainly what happened with Redford, and to a lesser extent that happened with Stelmach, although Ted Morton was a key figure in that as well. But, you know, having a giant caucus and a very small cabinet is a very dangerous position for a leader like Prentice to be in, because you're potentially just asking for problems. So I think he has an incentive to actually cut his caucus down to something more manageable, 40 or 50.
Isn't that funny? That's such a strange, counterintuitive idea that he would actually like to be less successful. But I can understand. I mean, it was so obvious to me how the PC party of a couple of elections ago wanted to get rid of Ted Morton, the only real right-wing thorn within. I mean, they so obviously wanted to dump him overboard. Maybe there are people that Prentice wants to purge. That's just so unusual. In a way, there's been more turmoil in Alberta politics in the last 4 years than in the last 40, but the result on election day has been just as monotonous, Tory majorities every time.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Alberta politics as well, you know, is that it's way more interesting to keep track of what's going on inside than it is than the actual elections. The elections are, you know, whatever, but what's happening between the leaders and the run-ups to those appointments, what happens in the by-elections, and certainly what's happening with internal party politics, both from the PCs and from the Wildrose, that stuff's been fascinating to watch.
You know,
and that's where you also see the movement and the changes in the government. I will say, yeah, there is a purging that seems to be happening. I mean, I think there was just another 2 announced today who decided they're not going to stand for re-election. But the purging seems to be happening from the center left, from the sorts of PCs who would have been most disaffected by the Wildrose floor crossing. So those are the people who seem to be getting pushed out, and people further from the right and from the fiscal right seem to be coming in. But I don't think that's going to stop tax hikes. That's inevitable now, I think.
It's been a long time since I've tried to read Dante's Inferno. It's a little tough going for a guy like me, but he talks about different levels of hell. And, you know, some people are packed in straw and ice, and different levels of hell for traitors, for those who are passive in times of moral decision. And I think of that because I think of people in the Wildrose party who were traitors, who were cowards, who were liars. And I'm not saying this just personally. They were traitors to their own party. They were cowards in that they didn't have the courage to face their own party on a vote. They were defectors. They have enabled their opponent. I mean, they have destroyed and dissolved democracy. What do you think will happen, putting aside, you know, what circle of hell they would be in? What do you think will happen to the Queen traitor, Danielle Smith and Highwood, and the other traitors? We see Rob Anderson is deciding not to run again. What will happen to the traitors?
Well, this is one of the very interesting internal questions. Of course, one of the things that we believe that the Wildrose floor crossers were promised when they made that decision was protected nomination. So you'll come into your PC nomination riding, and we'll protect you. We'll make sure that you get elected within that board so that you can stand for re-election as a PC party member. It turns out that when they actually did the crossing, that really wasn't so much in the fine print. Wow. So now a lot of these Wildrose /PC floor crossers are going to be facing potentially very competitive nomination races, which means there's a very, very high possibility that Danielle Smith, for example, will be booted away from the nomination before she ever even has a chance to step into the RIP period.
Isn't that interesting?
Like, she could be gone.
It's great to talk with you. I look forward to having you some more. We're out of time today, but you keep up the fight there in Alberta. We're